Beverly Marsh, that's who I want to see. Covered on horror history. Sponsored by Privacy.com. Privacy provides new virtual numbers so that you never have to use your real bank information. Use personalized cards for each purchase. Set limits monthly or one-time limits to make sure that you're safe. To get started, go to privacy.com/CZsWorld and you can get a free $5 just for signing up. Each child in Derry is terrorized by the shape-shifting it based on their childhood fears. But Beverly Marsh is a bit of a different case because she's already facing the anxieties that she would combat as an adult because of the circumstances of her home life. Welcome to Horror History. My name is Defaced US Currency in the name of fan art. In today's lesson, I'll be analyzing the life of the only girl in the Losers Club. Maybe I should call this reverse harem history. To understand Beverly, we've got to start with her home life. Beverly Marsh was born in 1947 and was the daughter of a janitor named Alvin Marsh and a waitress named Elfrida. Elfrida had a lot of love for her daughter, but struggled to get particularly close to her like her father did. But unlike Alvin, she at least had a healthy relationship with Bev. Al develops inappropriate feelings towards his daughter, causing Mrs. Marsh to subconsciously pick up on the abuse, which worried her more and more as Bev reached her pubescent years. Once she was old enough, Beverly started babysitting in order to make a little bit of money. She may have also had an interest in babysitting as a reaction to the fact that she never really received the kind of nurturing that she deserved from her own parents. When Beverly was 11 years old in 1958, she was already growing into her looks in the eyes of the 5th grade class, causing her to get bullied by jealous female classmates like Sally Mueller and Greta Bowie. They make fun of her the best way they know how, by insulting her lower class upbringing.
One of us lived around here.
Right.
Yeah.
Right down the street.
Her father, she was poor. Her father was the janitor. This was poor town.
On the last day of school in 1958, Beverly notices a boy from her class, Ben Hanscom, standing in the walkway with a dazed look. She tells him to have a nice summer, and they go their own ways, but they would cross paths again early that summer. Bev must have received a beating from her dad in the meantime, because when she next sees Ben, there's a bruise on her right cheek. This is most likely because Ben leaves a love poem at her front door, and her father hates the idea of her romantic involvement with boys, so he physically punishes her. It seems that both movie adaptations have come to the same conclusion. Although the love poem may have gotten her in trouble, she still loved it and the way that it made her feel when she read it. A feeling that she would remember for many years to come. One summer day, she's sitting outside the drugstore and Richie Tozier comes by and asks if she's going to the movies. She doesn't have the money, so Richie offers to pay for her. Beverly refers to this as her first date as a joke and pretends that she's going to write about it in her diary. In reality, Bev is joining not only Richie but also Ben Hanscom on the outing. The first hint of their attraction to one another flares up during this meeting. "Hi Richie," Ben said, and then looks at Bev briefly. It was as if he was afraid that an overlong look might result in a flash burn. "Hi Bev." "Hello Ben," she said, and a strange silence fell between the two of them. It was not precisely awkward, it was, Richie thought, almost powerful, and he felt a vague twinge of jealousy because something had passed between them, and whatever it had been, he had been excluded from it. They see a horror double feature and sit on the balcony to avoid the bullies, Henry Bowers, Victor Chris, and Belch Huggins, who had it in for Ben at the time. As they're leaving, they're spotted, so they try to sneak out the side door, but find themselves surrounded, along with 2 other thugs that were also backing Bowers. Richie and Ben try to fight back as Belch went after Beverly. He grabbed her ponytail and used it to swing her against the wall, which her arms slammed into, but she's somehow able to slip away, and the 3 of them run from the alley to the police station, where they're able to let off the tension with a laugh, and Beverly hugs both of them. For the first time, she realizes that Ben was the one who sent her the love poem on the postcard. I think she makes this conclusion not just based on the way that Ben acts around her, because all the boys show a certain awkwardness.
Next day's function, high-class luncheon, food is served in your stone cold muncheon. Music comes.
But I think Beverly knows that it's Ben specifically because of the shine, the psychic connection that all of the Losers Club share, which I explained in full detail in this video. Once they all feel that they're safe from Bowers, they decide to show Beverly the Barrens, the spot where they all usually play throughout that summer. Bill Denbrough and Bradley Donovan also show up that afternoon, and Beverly finds that she's got a crush on Bill, mostly because of his natural leadership ability. That evening, Beverly has her first encounter with the monster that lurks below Derry, it. But her experience goes much differently than any of her classmates. If you're smart with your online accounts, you probably have different passwords for different accounts. That way, if one password gets compromised, you don't have to worry about changing every single account. So when you buy stuff online with a credit card, why should that be any different? With Privacy.com, you can create virtual card numbers for each different vendor that you purchase from. They also let you set limits on each card so no vendor can ever charge you more than expected. And if anyone tries to pull a fast one, you'll know who's responsible. The service is free to use, so there's no reason not to try it. In fact, as a special incentive for horror history viewers, they're gonna give you $5 if you sign up using my link, Privacy privacy.com/CZsWorld. You can use that literally anywhere you want. You can transfer it to yourself, withdraw it, and then draw emo Abraham Lincoln fan art on it if you want. Personally, I'd just spend it. privacy.com/CZsWorld. Beverly is home washing up when she hears a voice whisper, "Help me," from her bathroom drain. Her first thought is that some kid got access to the pipes and was pranking her until she hears the voice from Mark. "We all want to meet you, Beverly." She also sees something move in the drain and smells an unpleasant scent and hears voices of the kids who had gone missing or died during that summer, like Matthew Clements, Betty Ripsum, and Veronica Grogan. A bubble of blood emerges in the drain and pops, spattering into the sink. The voices tell her that they're with the clown, the creature, the mummy, the werewolf, and that they all float, and that she'll float too when she's down there with them. More blood torrents from the drain and gets on the wall and mirror. Beverly runs out of the bathroom. Most of the other kids in Derry see it in the form of some kind of monster, but the blood represents what disturbs Beverly the most, her first period and her budding sexuality. This is what caused her father to see her differently, her female classmates to dislike her, and many of the men in town to take on a predatory role towards her. This is reflected in what happens next. She brings her father in to look at the mess, but he's unable to see it. In fact, none of the adults can see it because they've already reached and accepted their adulthood. Only kids have to deal with this fear of growing up. The next morning, Bev wakes up to the sound of the alarm clock coming from her parents' room, another more subtle symbol for the abusive behavior of her dad. In most cases, you wouldn't hear someone else's alarm clock unless you're sleeping with them. But the literal explanation for this is that the family is poor and lives in a tiny apartment, so she can hear it from her room. Bev and her mom are supposed to clean the house that day, but her mom has to leave to help out one of her friends that had been in a car accident. Before heading out though, Elfrida asks Beverly if her father ever touches her. What? Beverly looked at her mother, totally perplexed. God, her father touched her every day. I don't get what you... Elfrida brushed it off and headed out. Like many adults in Derry, she too is inclined to ignore the fact that there's a problem. That's part of what it does to the town. Beverly cleans the house but avoids the still bloody bathroom after hearing Pennywise's laugh emanating from the drain. She goes out that afternoon and at 3 p.m. comes across Ben, Bradley Donovan, and another boy from school, Eddie Kasprag, who are all pitching pennies in Richard's Alley next to the drugstore. This is a game commonly played in the 50s where you have to try to throw your penny against a wall and whoever lands theirs closest to the edge wins all of the pennies. Beverly joins in the game and wins 7 out of the next 8 rounds, netting her a whopping 24 cents. Bradley Donovan, feeling the frustration of having taken 8 consecutive L's, accused her of cheating. Ben stands up for his girl, and he's basically about to fight Bradley Donovan, but Beverly gives him his pennies back, claiming that she was never playing for keeps. But I guess that just made things more humiliating for Big D, because he knocked those emo Abraham Lincoln coins right out of her hand and said, "You're just a little Biff, that's all. Cheater, cheater, your mother thought..." Prostitute. But with a W. For some reason, this insult hit Beverly harder than expected and made her think of that morning when her mom had dropped the question, "Does he ever touch you?" Eddie and Ben try to comfort her and she cries out, "My mother is not a she's a waitress." Bev, Ben, and Eds put their money together to get ice cream frappes, and Beverly opens up to the boys about the incident with the blood the previous night. Local Jew Stan Uris also shows up, and Beverly tells them the whole story because she feels that these guys are there in a way that Bradley was not. Stan felt like one of them, and I believe this goes back to the idea that the kids who would become the 7 members of the Losers Club have a stronger shine than others, and thus a tighter bond. The boys agree to take a look at the drain with her, and they have to sneak in the back door in order to prevent her neighbor, Mrs. Bolton, from telling her father that she'd been seen with the boys. They help her clean the blood and take the dirty rags down to the washateria in town, where Ben and Stan offer additional comfort by sharing their own stories of Pennywise encounters. That night, Beverly puts away the clean rags and gets the bravery to try to run a measuring tape down the drain to see how far it really went. And after reaching 18 feet, the full length of the tape, she still had not hit the bottom. The voice tells her she'll die if she tries to fight. And when she brings back up the tape, it's covered in blood, and another burst of blood oozed out of the drain. This time she plugs it. I'm sure you can figure out what that represents, before being left to clean it up, alone this time, crying as she did so. Things got worse before they got better. The month of July would begin shortly after, and Beverly would get into a heated argument with the boy that she was most interested in. Believe it or not, Bradley Donovan did not come back around after that last incident, but that's okay because the group had plenty of B names already, like Beverly, Bill, and Ben. They would often meet up with Eddie, Stan, and Richie to play in the Barrens, and one afternoon, July 3rd, Bill Denbrough gets a bad feeling and tells his friends to create a stash of rocks, which would soon be used to fend off Bowers and his gang and protect Mike Hanlon. During this apocalyptic rock fight, Beverly only had one rock, which she used to nail Henry in the stomach. But perhaps the most important part of the fight was when she got hit by a large rock thrown by Henry, sending Ben into an outrage where he tackled Henry and the others covered him during his attack. At the conclusion, Beverly specifically thanked Ben for standing up for her, and Mike became the 7th and final one to join the group, which would be referred to as the Losers Club, the same name that Henry Bowers had used to address them. For the next week or so, the Losers Club focused on building an underground clubhouse in the Barrens, which was supposed to keep them hidden from Bowers and his gang. Beverly contributed by nailing the cross pieces in to help support the structure, and going into town with Stan to buy the hinges necessary to create the swinging door. Near the completion of the clubhouse, they take a break, and Mike shows the group some Pennywise sightings littered throughout Derry's history and his father's historical photo album, and they all have a scare when it nearly jumps out of the page to kidnap them. Before the end of the month, the clubhouse is finished, and the next step the Losers Club takes to try to bring down Pennywise is performing the smoke hole ritual. This was a Native American practice where the chiefs would breathe in smoke and supposedly have visions about what they should do next. Do not try this, it is dangerous, and it will not work. The losers decide that they'll attempt the ritual inside of their clubhouse, so Bill nominates Beverly to stay up and save them if they pass out. This pisses her off though. She doesn't want to be left out just because she's the only girl, so she comes up with an alternate solution. She pulls out her matchbook and lights one match. Then she puts the burnt side down with the 6 other matches, and each member takes one. Whoever got the burnt one was supposed to stay up top, however, after everyone had pulled, none of them were burnt anymore. The losers take this as a sign that they're all supposed to take part. This may have happened due to intervention from Matcher and the Turtle, the rival entity of it, but for more on that, you should watch my Pennywise horror history. The fire was started with one of Bev's matches, and she ended up being the 4th one to climb out, leaving just Bill, Richie, and Mike. After Bill climbed out, some time passed before Bev and the others decided to pull out the last 2, and after they had recovered, they told the story of how they had seen the arrival of it many years ago. After having seen the arrival of it, the next step was to decide how they would fight it. Later that month, after attempting to visit Eddie as he sat in a hospital with a broken arm, the remaining 6 of them took turns firing at cans in the Barrens with Bill's slingshots. Beverly was by far the best, hitting all 10 cans, 9 of which were dead-on shots. They planned to melt down Ben's silver dollars to create ammunition, because they believed that silver would hurt the monster, just like in the werewolf movies. Before getting the chance to put the plan into action, Beverly runs into a little complication while practicing with the slingshot alone one day in the Barrens. She heard some noises down by the dump and approached, thinking that it was her friends. What she found instead was the Bowers gang. They were lighting farts on fire, and Bev has to hide inside of a junk car to avoid being seen. Victor and Belch head out, leaving just Henry and an extremely disturbed kid, Patrick Hochstetter. She basically ends up seeing some queer stuff go down between them, and Patrick blackmails Henry $1 to keep quiet about it. Henry snaps back at Patrick, telling him that if he says anything, he'll reveal what Patrick was hiding in the abandoned refrigerator in the dump. Beverly doesn't know what that meant, but on her way out of the Barrens, she noticed Patrick was thrashing around and dancing near the fridge before disappearing down the path as he screamed. She approached the fridge and saw blood, the very thing it had used to frighten her before, but this time it was real. She also heard her father's voice and thought for sure it must have been a hallucination because her dad was out of town that day. But I personally think that it was using the form of Mr. Marsh, one of the things that Beverly feared most. She was also attacked by a small blood-sucking leech with wings. When she smashed it, it continued to leech off of her, and she had to physically pick it off. There were a couple more parasites near the fridge, and without thinking, she tried to shoot one of them with a slingshot. She felt that she had missed her shot, but saw the ball bearing strangely curve and destroy one of the leeches. At the time, she didn't know how that was possible. She was only beginning to understand the power that she and the other losers had simply by believing in themselves. After that, she continued to run down the path, apparently choosing the lesser of 2 evils by risking seeing Patrick. What she saw instead was an even bigger mess of blood, and understands Hochstetter's fate when she hears the laughter of the clown coming from inside one of the pumping stations connected to the sewer. Beverly ran from the Barrens to find the others, and 4 hours later, they all marched back to the junkyard to investigate, where they saw a message written in blood. "Stop now before I kill you all. A word to the wise from your friend, Pennywise." Bill asked Beverly and the other losers to help him avenge his brother Georgie, who was killed by it, and together they hug in the rain, silently making a pact to take down the monster. When they went ahead to carry out the plan, Beverly would see even more disturbing things that would stay with her for years and years to come. On the evening of July 23rd, the 7 of them played Monopoly at Bill's house as they waited for the melted down silver to harden into the silver slugs to be shot at Pennywise. Beverly called her mom and said that she was at Community House, and that she would get a ride home from Bill Denborough's father. Upon hearing this, her mom has to clarify with her that she's not on a date, and asks if any of her girlfriends are there. This line highlights the distance between Bev and her mom. Elfrida doesn't even realize that Bev has no female friends, so she has to make up some lie about a pair of girls on top of the lie that she's already telling about her whereabouts. After the silver slugs were finished, Beverly asked Bill to hold on to them until it was time to use them. She was afraid of her father finding them and taking them from her, which just goes to show the complete lack of privacy that Beverly had at home. She also grows more interested in Bill as the night goes on, thinking, if he held my hand, I think I'd be so glad I'd probably die. 2 days later, around 10 a.m., the Losers Club arrived at its lair, its gateway between the sewers that sprawled underneath Derry and the surface, 29 Neibolt Street. After venturing upstairs, Beverly opens a cupboard and an ordinary rat comes scampering out. Bev was so on edge that she nearly fired the first slug and wasted it on nothing more than an ordinary rodent, but she was able to hold back from doing so. They also discover something described as a girly book in one corner, and the woman on the cover who winks at Ben was actually a younger version of Mrs. Kirsch, another form of it that Bev would encounter 27 years later upon returning to Derry. She remembers this small detail from the magazine cover nearly 3 decades later, which I find to be a powerful indicator of just how traumatizing the trip into 29 Neibolt must have been for her, after only previously encountering bipedal forms of it very briefly on the page in Will Hanlon's photo album. They come across 3 doors, the last of which was a destroyed bathroom with white shards scattered about, as if the toilet bowl had exploded. They would soon find out how the room came to assume this corrosive state. It rushed up from the pipes leading down to the sewer in what is described as its own form, then explodes out into the bathroom, taking the form of the werewolf in a Derry High School Letterman jacket. Bev has 2 slugs to shoot, 2 chances to take it down. She fires the slingshot at the monster but misses her first shot. Mike finds the ball bearing and gives it back to Bev. The werewolf sprang at Bill in an attempt to take down their leader first, and Beverly fired another shot, but it missed and punched a hole through the wall. The creature then goes after Ben and slashes at him, and with her final shot, she pierces its snout, sending up a torrent of blood and saving the boy whose poem had carried her through the most horrible weeks she had ever endured. Still, it's continued to come after them, and with no ammo left, she pulled back the sling once again, and believed she could hurt it with her mind, and this caused it to dive back into the drain, screaming, "I'll kill you all," as it descended into the sewers. Just as Silver was able to hurt it, based on the childish beliefs that tactics from the movie would actually work, Bev was able to scare it away just by motioning the empty slingshots. During the attack, Beverly's blouse was cut open by the werewolf's claws, so Bill offers up his shirt for her to cover herself with it. It would not be the first or last time there was romantic tension between the two, but it would be the last event of that July. On August 10th, 1958, Alvin Marsh went into a mad rage upon learning that Beverly was hanging out in the Barrens with a bunch of boys, and after whacking her on the face, decided to disgustingly take advantage of the situation by making Beverly prove to him that she's still intact. He had also been down to the Barrens and saw her smoking, causing him to lose control and start breaking things in the house, which made Beverly begin to fear for her life. At some point, she got the idea that it wasn't just him though. The influence of it was helping push his anger over the edge. She even hints at the idea that Pennywise was the one to show Mr. Marsh what she was doing in the Barrens, or at least give him the idea to look there. I think this one line does a good job of explaining how its influence over Alvin works. "You come back here." "No," she said. "You want to hurt me. I love you, Daddy, but I hate when you're like this. You can't do it anymore. It's making you do it, but you let it in." The effect of it on Mr. Marsh and the intensity of how scary he had become are both illustrated after Alvin tries to pounce on her, and she runs out the door. He chased right after her into town, and the little neighbor boy, Lars Theraminius, saw him chase after Beverly in a crazed frenzy, a vision that would give him nightmares for weeks. In the nightmares, he saw Mr. Marsh turning into a spider as he chased his daughter out the door, which of course represents the final form of it that the losers would soon face. Aside from this being the day that she would put an end to the current cycle of it, Bev also had a phenomenal cardio day.
Run.
Because the chase by her father continued well into Derry's downtown area, where Bev hid under a dumpster truck, which Alvin crawled under to try to get her. She took off into a smaller alley, which her father ran past, and she was finally able to lose him. She picks up a pretty nasty smell from being under the truck though, and I think it represents a foul version of the smell that's described in the novel earlier that summer. The smell represents lust, her father's lust for her, and her discovering lust for the first time that summer when meeting Bill Denbrough. But the smell of the garbage truck that gets on her represents the awful feeling that she has when she fears her own parent and wants nothing more than to repel him. But Alvin, a janitor by trade, is continually coming after her. Unfortunately for Beverly, it was out for revenge for what she did to it at 29 Neibolt Street a couple of weeks ago, and Alvin Marsh wasn't the only one that it had sent after her. The morning before Mr. Marsh's mad fit of rage chased Beverly out of the house and into Derry, a familiar voice told Henry Bowers to gather Belch and Victor and go to Kansas Street that afternoon. Henry, who is holding on to the smallest sliver of sanity, obeys the command and shows up to find Beverly there in a panic after just escaping her father. The voice speaks to Henry again, this time telling him to kill her, and another chase ensues.
Run.
Beverly must have been tired from the long run away from her dad, because although she had no problem running away from the bullies after the movie theater incident, this time Henry catches up to her and grabs her hair. Bev's hair has been somewhat of a motif for her appeal, as established in Ben's poem. In fact, in the 2017 adaptation, she cuts off a good portion of it after her father creepily strokes the locks hanging down around her shoulders. There are a couple of adults who see what Henry's about to do to her, but they don't do anything to help. Another example of the so-called disease that plagues the adults of Derry into letting the evil spread. One nutshot later, Beverly is running into the Barrens with Henry limping after her, along with his goons Victor and Belch.
Run.
She's able to distance herself a little bit and heads for the clubhouse, where she finds Ben by himself and quickly explains what's going on. After hearing that Bowers had 100% lost it, Ben brings down the hatch, shutting them in the clubhouse. The camouflage of the clubhouse worked perfectly, because the bullies came up and stood directly on the lid without realizing it. Beverly holds on tightly to Ben. She worried that the dumpster smell that covered her would give them away, and they struggled not to laugh at Belch's stupid comments. Meanwhile, the weight of the three bullies is starting to crack the wooden hatch, and Ben and Bev were in danger of them falling through into the clubhouse. The bullies move on just in time though, and once Beverly is sure that they're gone, her and Ben share a laugh. I think the danger of that experience brought her and Ben closer together, because she then decides to thank Ben for writing the poem to her at the beginning of that summer. Before long, they realize that they'd better warn the others not to go into the Barrens, with Henry prowling the area, clearly out for blood. A little more cardio couldn't hurt, right? They run into town, and they're able to find Bill, Eddie, Richie, Stan, and Mike. The group, led by Bill, decides to go back into the Barrens under the idea that it's not Bowers' property, and they shouldn't have to be afraid of going to their favorite spots. When they arrive there, he realizes something that Bev had concluded a little bit earlier that day, that Bowers was being controlled by it, and by defeating it, they could put an end to most of their problems. So as they head to the pumping station where they can climb down into the sewers and confront Pennywise, they're attacked by some rocks that fly out from the bushes. Yeah, why not one more time? Okay, that's getting old. After getting into the sewer, they traverse the network of pipes until they eventually make it to the lair of it, where Bill goes head-to-head with Pennywise in a void known as the Macroverse. Most of the losers thought that it was dying, as Bill and it returned to the real world, but Bev was one of the two members who seemed a little unsure. Even after defeating it, they still had one more dangerous obstacle to overcome. As they searched for the exit of the sewers, the group felt that they were drifting apart. The power that had united them in their battle seemed to be fading, and they were unable to navigate their way out of the dark labyrinth of pipes. The seven of them needed some kind of spark to bring them closer to each other again, and Beverly realizes how she can do it. Her role is to share her love with the others. One by one, she embraces them. And just as the defeat of it marks the beginning of their adulthood by showing their ability to overcome a horrible trauma, this love scene represents the first step of that transition to adulthood, which begins with their teenage years and includes dating and relationships. I mean, if you read the book, it's a bit more graphic. So moving on, they find their way out of the tunnels and make a blood pact, promising to come back to destroy it if it ever returns. Later that month, Beverly enters middle school, and she and Richie Tozier sign up for the talent show, where they are to perform a couple of dances, one called the Hell's a Poppin' and another known as Lindy Hopping. I would demonstrate, but the only dances that I'm familiar with are called moshing and headbanging. In another Stephen King novel, 11/22/63, an English teacher named Jake Epping time travels from 2011 to 1958 in order to try to prevent the Kennedy assassination. But he takes a detour in Derry, where he encounters Beverly and Richie practicing for this talent show in a picnic area near the Barrens. Beverly and Richie kind of connect with Jake because they, unlike many others, are able to understand the supernatural aspect of Jake's task and see him as less of an outsider than most of those living in the late 50s and early 60s. Not much is known about Beverly's years as a young adult, aside from the fact that she moves to Chicago and becomes a clothing designer at Delia Fashions, where she creates clothing for a younger clientele. I think we can assume the reason she left Derry was to get away from her abusive father, but she ends up falling into the same trap by marrying an abusive husband. This is actually a common coping tactic for victims of abuse like Beverly. It's known as re-victimization, and according to a research brief that looked at a number of studies between 2000 and 2011, victims of childhood abuse are 2 to 13 times more likely to put themselves in a similar situation in adulthood. So for Beverly, she subconsciously associated her father's actions with the love of a parent, and developed feelings after meeting Tom Rogan at a singles bar in 1981, and discovering that they worked in the same building together. The two would get together and start a new brand called Beverly Fashions. One day, they were together in the car on the way home from a party, and he told her he never wants to see her smoking again. She agrees and tosses the cigarette, but a few weeks later, after a movie, she lights one again by habit, and he gets mad and strikes her in the face. When she responded, he beat her up inside of the car and makes her repeat the phrase, "I'll never do it again without your permission," as if she were a child. Tom's aversion to smoking is interesting because that's exactly what set Bev's father over the edge to attack her on that August day in 1958. The act of smoking is similar to Beverly's action of dating an abusive man, Tom, because both are examples of her willingly doing something harmful to herself in a subconscious or habitual way. Smoking is prohibited by both of her abusers, but when she's with her friends in the Losers Club, she uses her matchbook in more constructive ways, like lighting the fire in the smoke hole that taught them more about it, and using matches to light the way as they attempted to navigate their way out of the sewers. And of course, the key line in Ben's poem to Beverly says, "Your hair is winter fire." Fire and smoke go hand in hand, and Bev would go on to be with Ben at the end of the story. But first, she would have to endure 4 years of an abusive marriage with Tom Rogan, because they were married in a civil ceremony 3 months after the smoking incident. And just like the day where she was chased out of the house by her father, she would go through another domestic incident after an unexpected call had come from Derry in 1985. The call from Mike Hanlon came in after Beverly and Tom had already gone to bed. As Tom went to the fridge to get a beer, Mike explained to Beverly that it had come back in Derry. Although she didn't fully remember what it was, she knew it was serious and immediately started packing. She also fell victim to a bad old habit and lit up a cigarette. So when Tom came back into the room, he was furious with her. He smacked her on the face, just like that day in the car, and then he brought out the belt. She bombards him by throwing a series of glass cosmetic bottles. It had been her impeccable aim that had helped the losers out in the rock fight and helped her drive it into the sewers with a slingshot at 29 knee-bolts, and this time it would help her escape Tom's attack. She fled down 3 blocks barefoot, where she found someone to give her 40 cents to use a payphone, and contact her friend Kay McCall, who gets her a cab. During the ride, the names of all of Bev's childhood friends slowly come back to her. She gets to Kay's house. Kay had seen the relationship that Bev had with Tom and was very happy that she'd finally left him. So she offers some money for Bev to take a cab from Chicago to the airport in Milwaukee, just in case Tom was going to try to ambush her at O'Hare or Midway. On the flight from Milwaukee to Logan Airport in Boston, she sits next to a man that she finds attractive, and he asks what's happened to her hand in reference to the red mark Tom's belt had left on her during the fight. She lies to him and says that she slammed it in a car door. Lying about her bad relationship has become her go-to, just as she hid what her father had done to her from her mother as a child. She also keeps the secret from her friends when she arrives in Derry, and they all meet for a reunion lunch. She even tells them that Tom was the one to transform her into a talent in regards to her career, because his overbearing control over her somehow warped her mind to believe that she didn't hold any merit on her own, which is another reason that it's so important for her and the other losers that had returned to Derry to regain their childhood memories and rediscover the power that had once defeated it. When they get their fortune cookies at the end of the meal, each one is manipulated by it to represent the loser's individual fears. Beverly's cookie sprays out blood, a possible reminder of the blood in her father's sink, or perhaps this time a reminder of a bloody footprint that she left after cutting her foot on the perfume bottle that she threw at Tom while she was escaping the house. Bev, Bill, Eddie, Richie, and Ben each set out on personal journeys through Derry to try to reclaim some of their old memories, and Beverly finds herself standing outside the clean clothes washateria where her friends had helped her clean the bloody rags. She decides to walk to her old house and see if her father was still there. She rings the doorbell for Marsh, but instead an old lady named Mrs. Kirsch answers the door and informs her that her father had passed away 5 years prior. Mrs. Kirsch invites her in for tea, but things start to go weird as they're sitting together. The woman's teeth start rotting and her eyes go yellow. Bev realizes she's in trouble when the lady's dress turns black like a scab, and she starts talking about her father, or rather, her fodder.
My father joined the circus.
She tells about her father, Robert Gray, who is also known as Pennywise the Dancing Clown, and upon hearing these words, Beverly gets this idea that her tea is actually shit from the sewers. How did you not realize that immediately, Beverly? I mean, you should be able to distinguish Earl Grey from Robert Gray pretty easily. Mrs. Kirsch warns her to get out of town because
No one who dies here ever really dies.
As she begins to transform into a witch from the fairy tale Hansel and Gretel. This witch had always been something that scared Beverly. The whole apartment starts turning to candy and she runs for the door, but she can hear her father's voice booming after her. When she looks back at the house, she sees the clown, Pennywise, holding the leg of a child and a balloon with the words, "It came from outer space," which is the name of another 50s horror movie that also happens to work with Stephen King's monster, It. Her father, Pennywise, and the witch from Hansel and Gretel all share the common traits of being monsters who prey on children. After getting across the street, Beverly looks back again and sees just a deserted house, but finds her fingers stained with chocolate. That night, the losers all meet at the library and recall more of their memories about the initial battle with Pennywise. Before calling it a night, Bev realizes that their hands are all bleeding and starts to scream. The scars where they each cut their hands to make the blood oath in 1958 had reopened, and they all joined hands once more. Bev is hit with a wave of thought, after which she remembers everything from her childhood, including but not limited to Bradley Donovan. But after leaving the library, Bill and Beverly walk back to the hotel together, hand in hand, and some of her old feelings are starting to come back. She asks Bill to kiss her, and he does. In fact, they end up going back to Bill's hotel room together, and although Bill has some second thoughts about being unfaithful in his marriage, Beverly does not, which is fair because she already walked out on her marriage. That night, he would give her her best time ever, and maybe understands for the first time what a healthy relationship could be like. They sleep together in Bill's room, and she thinks back through all of the years of her childhood. That is, until her dreams are cut short by another shocking phone call. After receiving a panicked call from Eddie Kasprak, Beverly and Bill rush to his room, at the stage of a surprise attack by an escaped Henry Bowers, who is now dead. Beverly, thinking of the adults who refused to help her when Bowers had come after her as a child, agrees that taking Eddie to the hospital in Derry may not be a good option. She dials the library to talk to Mike, but the police chief, Andrew Rademacher, picks up and informs her that Henry has already gotten there first and put Mike in the hospital. The group decides that they've already let this go on too long and heads back to the sewers for a final showdown with it. They climb back into the sewers and make their way to the door of its inner sanctum. The one thing that none of them can really remember properly is what lies beyond this door, but Beverly does remember that they fought it using the ritual of Chud. They enter the lair and are once again greeted by the giant spider form of it. This time, however, it's Bill and Richie who enter the Macroverse to battle it in the ritual of Chud. Meanwhile, Eddie tries to fight it in the physical world, but takes a major L and gets his arm ripped off. Beverly holds him in her arms during his final moments, and Richie and Bill went on to finish off it deeper in the chamber, while Ben goes to destroy its eggs and prevent any potential offspring. Beverly had previously saved the entire group by providing her love, so it's only fitting that she be there for Eddie during his final moments. After it had been defeated, the eggs smashed and Eddie laid to rest, the others reconvened with Beverly and they headed out of the chamber for the final time. They ended up climbing out of a cracked sewer pipe to discover a flood that had destroyed the town above them during the final battle. And with Bill's wife being rescued, she says goodbye to him with one last hug. A photo of this appears in the newspaper with the caption, "Survivors." Meanwhile, Beverly has been growing closer to Ben with the reacquired memories of the times that they shared in their childhood and the re-realization of his authorship of the poem that she had always treasured. With no more abusive people in her life, she finally decides to quit smoking. The four remaining losers, excluding Mike, who is still alive but still in the hospital, decide to go out for breakfast. There were 4 of them, but Beverly notices their reflection in a window, where she sees 6. Eddie and Stan had joined them in spirits. It was probably not long after when Beverly revealed the truth to Ben, that she didn't really have anywhere to go after having left her husband. So Ben invites her to go with as he drives back across the country to Nebraska. So on June 5th, 1985, they set out together. Mike talks to them on the phone before being released from the hospital, and something tells him they'll end up getting married. Beverly Marsh, Beverly Rogan, and then perhaps Beverly Hanscom was the thread that tied together the Losers Club. Her love picked the group up at their lowest. Her 99 accuracy saved them on countless occasions, and she was there to help through practically everything as they saved Derry from the curse of the creature who had created chaos there for as long as the town's history goes back. If you want to hear about the histories of other characters from it, click the playlist on the left, and if you love horror, let me know what franchise I should cover next on Horror History. And remember to subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring that death bell for notifications, and I'll see you in the next one, assuming we both survive. I am taking a nap.